What got you into crop circles?
I knew exactly what I was looking at when I was ironing a shirt, a guy ironing a shirt in Chicago, where I lived. I just moved to America, and I was just watching the news, and the sound was turned off. Funny enough, I worked in media for a long time, but I haven't watched I don't watch television. It's one of those strange things, but I had a television on, the sound was turned off, and there was some program about the news, and there was a combine harvester going through a field in England, and there was this incredible symbol. And I remember remarking to my wife at the time, and I said, I know exactly what that is. And she says, what is it? I said, I can't explain it, but I know exactly what it is. I've seen this before. And it's like something just clicked. And I could actually, and looking back on it now, I can actually look at my career going downhill at that moment. And it was a successful career. I mean, I was making a lot of money, being very miserable, selling refrigerators and other things to people. You know, someone's got to do it. But my passion was always in the mysteries of life, the ancient civilization. I just didn't know how to make a living out of it. But little did I know that that little image on the screen got me to go back to England for 4 weeks on vacation, which you don't do in America, which gets me fired automatically, and that's cool. And so I spent my time researching and asking questions, and the more questions I asked, the more questions came up. And then I got involved with the research and became part of the research community. And one thing led to the other, and before I knew it, I had so much information that I was being egged on by my friends. You need to write a book about this because you come up with something that no one else has. You've actually got to the core of what the phenomenon is about, what's behind it, and how it all clicks together. Because that's what I used to do for a living. I used to take marketing briefs with lots of information. I had to condense that into a billboard that sells you a particular message. I have to do exactly the same thing with this. I just never made the connection between the two. And grudgingly, I actually sat down one day and in my attic and started to write down my notes. And then chapter 3 came out, chapter 8 came out, chapter 1 came out. And within a week, I've got half a book written. As a writer, that doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen that way. It still took a couple of years to do all the science and back it up with hard science, which I did. But one of the things that I was missing was there are things here which don't connect. There's the electromagnetic spectrum, which has been manipulated by real crop circles, changes in the soil, chemical structure, imprinting of the water on the groundwater as well. All of that was being proved. There was also an anti-gravitational quality to the plants as well. And you can tell by the way the roots were pointing in the wrong direction. Now, that doesn't happen in agriculture, doesn't happen in real life. So someone is manipulating the laws of nature. Someone's trying to be a god, in other words. And so I just went out one day in the middle of a field at 11 o'clock at night, and I said, perhaps if I lie down in one, in perfect silence, and just meditate on the situation, because by then the groups of people who were very connected with the core of the phenomenon were actually communicating with the core of beings that were behind it. And we were able to predict where they're going to appear and what they're going to look like. Of course, they never gave us the exact location and the exact timing because they didn't want to give away how the whole thing's put together. It was a bit of a game, but it was a friendly game. But anyway, there was a communication.
How were you communicating with them?
It was basically subconscious. We'd be able to guess using intuition. I know where the next one's going to be, and I think it's going to be on Friday. Well, it'd actually be on Thursday, and you'd be one field over. You're getting really, really close. And when you consider you're dealing with Great Britain, which is a pretty big island, and a lot of fields, that's pretty good. And I was playing this game with people across the Atlantic as well. I'd ask physicists, psychics, mathematicians, writers for their opinion. When's the next one going to be? Where's it going to be? What's it going to look like? And all of us were getting it pretty much close, within 1 or 2 fields, within 48 hours of the actual event. So we knew that there was a communication going on. Not only could we predict it, but we're also being fed information. Like you get this sudden idea of, oh, perhaps I should be looking into the gravitational pull on the way that the gravity affects roots in plants. Now, where the hell did I come up with that? I'm not a physicist. I'm not an agriculturalist. I had to go and look in a paper in Russia in 1953 that talks about the effect of anti-gravity on plants. So this is what I was saying. Someone was putting ideas into our head, and the only way that we could figure out where this was coming from, someone is feeding us the information, and it has to be the people who are behind the making of the crop circle.
But was it fed during live meditation, or was it fed just
You could be having a
randomly?
pint at a pub, and perhaps I should be saying that because that affects the whole process. But no, you'd be having a pint at a pub, looking at some cows, and you go, well, that's interesting. Let me get my notebook out. Now, why would that be? And then I get an email from someone I never heard of saying you should look at this paper from 1953 about anti-gravity and blah, 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 blah. And I thought, well, thank you. That's exactly what I was about to do. How did you know? And the email bounces back. There's no such address. There was all of these weird things going all around us. So we knew there was something behind the scenes that was working on us and through us. And the only way we could figure this out is whoever's behind this is able to communicate subconsciously. And I've heard that in the UFO community, that there's always this non-verbal communication between people who have, is it Close Encounters of the Third Kind? Yes. When there's that communication, but somehow they're able to communicate in the language of where you come from. Not a perfect syntax, by the way. If you get perfect syntax, that's coming from your own head, because people outside this planet don't have perfect syntax in English. It's close, but not close enough. But they do communicate in a very subconscious way. And I've heard this again and again and again. So that's how we began to make that sort of connection. So back to the field.
Yeah. And are these the same people? Are these the 8.5-foot tall people that are connecting with you?
I didn't know this at the time, but yes, they are.
Okay.
Because when I heard the footsteps coming up behind me, I thought, God, I forgot to ask the farmer for permission to be here, but, I'm not really damaging anything. I'll come up with an explanation. And then the footsteps stopped. This enormous bright light suddenly appeared above me, and I said, well, I don't really do abductions. I got work to do. I don't need to be abducted. And the light went off, and someone hit me on the back of the shoulder, a bit like Mr. Spock doing the pressure thing. And suddenly I felt all my trepidation just vanish. I went, oh, I feel pretty good now. And I started watching my hand floating around me. And I still remember this. This was back in 1996, 97. And I was saying, wow, that's interesting. My arms are floating. Oh, both my arms are floating. And suddenly I can't feel the ground beneath me. I'm literally floating above the crop circle. And that's when you're now on another level of reality. And remember, I'm not imagining this. I'm physically experiencing this whole thing. And I remember seeing 3 people on either side dressed exactly the same way that I found in the Great Pyramid 5 years later, with 2 more at the front, and they were making these gestures with their hands like Balinese dancers. And I was lying there, standing there. In the 4th dimension, you don't know if you're standing or lying down. And I remember going, okay, yeah, okay, I totally understand, yeah. There was a sort of communication that was going on that was almost geometric. And next thing I know, I heard this click next to me, and I've taken a boombox. If you're under 30 years of age, you'd have to go and Google boombox and cassette tape. 45 minutes of the tape had elapsed. I just took a little quiet music to take with me in the field. And I heard the click, and I hit the ground with such a thud that I still had a bump on the back of my head 2 days later. And I thought, well, that was weird. And I drove back to my bed and breakfast. I got out of my bed, went and had breakfast next day. And I had another friend who's an incredibly gifted psychic as well. And she says to me, how did the evening go? And I said, I don't know if I can explain this. She goes, well, just have a cup of coffee. You never make sense before coffee anyway. So I sat down there with my coffee. I'm Mediterranean, so I've got to have my thick coffee before the machinery gets going. And then she starts channeling about what happened to me the night before. And she exactly, just like in Egypt 5 years later, she describes exactly the entire process. So I realized I hadn't made this up. And I hadn't been going there to make something up or expecting anything. So how could I make this stuff up? So that validated it for me. And it was then that I started connecting the dots that were missing between anti-gravity, electromagnetism, the disruption of the soil, and the encoding of the water in one lovely theory, which today, 30-odd years later, still holds its course. It hasn't been challenged. So, in fact, I just reprinted a book about 2 years ago because it was like swapping hands at $500 a copy on eBay. So I figured I better reprint it and sell it back at $20, which is much more reasonable. So that's how I ended up doing all of this, because I realized that these people, and I call them people because for me they're very real. They're like an extended family to me. They have been guiding my work. I just wasn't aware that's where my path was going. So for me, it means that it's self-validating because I'm not making this up. I literally don't know where I go with my work. Even today, right now, with the 8.1 books and 15 documentaries, I still don't know what the next project is, because I have to go where my passion is and where I feel something is worth talking about and merits talking about, and it's of benefit to the society as a whole.
Let's get into your whole theory in just a minute, but these people, we call them people, but are they? Is this an extraterrestrial race of people, or is this what are these people?
They wouldn't address themselves as extraterrestrial. They would address themselves as being just on another level of reality. And they did make a point years later that there's no point figuring out where we are in the universe. You humans, and I quote, do not have the numerical values in which you can express where we are on our level of reality. Just accept that we're in the room next door. They have a good sense of humor about this. We're in the room next door, so don't worry about numbers. It's not, whether it's fifth dimension, 400th dimension, it doesn't matter. We're in a different radio station along the dial, but you know what? We're sharing the same dial. That's the important thing. And we've been coming in your Earth history, and I'm quoting directly now from memory. We've been appearing in your human history throughout the last 12,000 years in human form. And then we stopped coming before we decided that, getting pelted by rocks doesn't really help. It actually hurts. Just because we're different and we're supposed to be more advanced doesn't mean we also don't bleed. We do. So now we suggest things to humans through crop circles, through ideas that we feed to scientists once in a while, and they think, that's a great idea. I think I'll go and develop a hydrogen-powered car engine. And they think it comes from their imagination. Actually, it's the universe, or what you call guardian angels in religious iconography. They're feeding us little bits of information at a time because they realize, as human beings, we'd like to trip ourselves over once in a while. We're going in the right direction, and suddenly we decide to basically take out the pitchforks and the torches, and we fight each other, and we go back to where we were 100 years ago. It's happening right now, politically around the world. So whenever they see and they hear humanity asking for help through prayer, because your prayer sends out a packet of information through time and space. So if you sit here in this room and you think, you know what, I really would like some assistance with this particular thing, or I'd like to help humanity move in a certain direction which benefits everybody, and you send that thought out, and somewhere in the universe, another thought comes the other way, and it hits certain people at certain times, and they become the leaders or thinkers or philosophers or even mathematicians, architects that we renowned throughout history. They suddenly get inspired to do something which really moves the chains of human evolution forward by hundreds of years in the blink of an eye. Nikola Tesla is one person I can point to. Where did he come from? Where did his ideas come from? They're so ahead of the thing. And that's where I think they fit in. They no longer appear in human form, but they still assist. They still suggest, and then they get out of the way. If you're a Star Trek fan tuning in, you'll understand what I'm saying. It's called a prime directive. And Gene Roddenberry, like myself, he also attended certain seances with a... what's her name? Phyllis Schlemmer, a famous American medium, another trance medium. And if you look at the transcripts of a book called The Only Planet of Choice, he's one of the people asking her the questions. He's got an assumed name. He's got a pseudonym, of course. But if you look at the second generation of Star Trek series, look at the actual dialogue that's going on and the message that's been conveyed in the episodes, and they talk about the prime directive, the law of non-intervention, the first rule of the universe, which is you can't intervene in the development of another species unless they've asked for help. And then you do it quietly and very subtly, and then you get the hell out of there. Let the species be given the information. Let them do whatever they do best, which is either work with it or argue about it. And that's what we do very well, of course. And the crop circles fit in that dimension very clearly. You either love what crop circles are all about, or you hate the stuff. You think it's all made by a bunch of guys with a piece of rope and some planks. And yes, today, that's how they're made. because the real phenomenon really doesn't exist anymore. It kind of stopped around 2003. Sorry to bring you the bad news, but it's still there. But from that, we've extracted mathematical theorems, the first time in 2,500 years. We've had anti-gravitational technology, which has now been built in England, in Oklahoma, of all places, and in Australia. And I can't tell you any more because, of course, I have to kill you. And this is the actual predicament, is that they developed the image that I put on the cover of my book. And I put that image on the cover for a certain reason, because I knew what it did. I just couldn't tell you what it was, because I knew that someone in the science community would be inspired by that image, and they would build that as an actual model. And they said, when they contacted us, it defies gravity. It's just that we can't bring this out right now because the political environment is such that it will go nowhere. We have to bide your time and wait for the right moment to bring this out. And sometimes it'll come out in increments, but that's how important this information is. So it goes back to what I was saying about these beings drip feeding bits of information that would help us move along. And in this case, is to wean us out of fossil fuels. I mean, anti-gravity is a wonderful thing. We're almost there with maglev. I mean, in Japan, where they have the trains that they travel at, what, 500 miles per hour or something ridiculous like that. I mean, it's an incredible feat of engineering, but you know what? It's quiet, efficient, and it doesn't pollute anything. So this is why I believe that these people are very much concerned with our development, and they are. They are very much concerned in the way that we're creating the decisions that we are right now, because everything that we do right now will have an effect through time and space. There are other species out there, millions of species out there, that are saying, well, whatever happens on Earth and whatever direction that they take will also affect the decisions that we make, because we're all connected at some level. Whether it's invisibly or tangibly, that doesn't matter. We are all connected. And whatever we decide to do will have repercussions through time and space. So they're concerned about our behavior, let's say, but they can't directly intervene. They can only suggest and then let us get on with the process.